they're pretending it's not gain of function while actually describing, at least to me, gain of function. So these are pretty extraordinary documents. They deserve worldwide attention. They should be followed up by prosecutors and investigators in Congress and the media and the world. Just a tremendous find by Judicial Watch. These are documents forced out of the the Department of Health and Human Services on FAUCI, the coronavirus, and China. Now, we had been suing for some time about those topics, and they've been giving us documents in a dribbling-like fashion. You may have seen news stories about how the FDA is telling one requester, or one, I guess they may be in court now, that they can only turn over documents at the rate of 500 pages a month, and there are supposedly hundreds of thousands of documents, which would mean it would take 55 years to release the documents. And everyone's saying, well, isn't that outrageous? Well, that's the sort of thing we've been operating under for some time at Judicial Watch. That's the standard now government response, which is the slow roll of release of information. And one of the reasons they said that they needed a slow roll of release of information in this specific group of cases is because Anthony Fauci and his team need to look at every document. So the reason we're getting stonewalled is because Anthony Fauci, in an unusual way, is participating in these FOIA lawsuits. At least that's what the government tells us. So we received, and they're not even giving us 500 pages a month or processing them, because they say they're giving them to you, but what they're actually doing is processing them. And you get some and not others, because others are withheld or parts of them are withheld. So we don't even get everything that they say they're processing. It includes a grant application that appears to describe gain of function research involving RNA extractions from bats, experiments on viruses, attempts to develop a chimeric virus, and efforts to genetically manipulate the full-length bat SARS-CoV WIV1 strain molecular clone. We obtained these through a lawsuit that we had filed for documents concerning the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and the documents are a shocker in this regard. First up, though, there's an email showing that A, they're hiding stuff from us, and B, reconfirming that this gain of function study was highlighted and shared with top leadership of Fauci's agency, even as they were telling us they weren't supporting gain of function research. On January 27th, 2020, a top official within Fauci's agency, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, wrote the chief of staff for Fauci, Greg Folkers, a heavily redacted series of emails back and forth. Some background on our support of the EcoHealth group, Peter Daszak et al., which has been for years among the biggest players in coronavirus work. NIAID, Fauci's agency, has been funding Peter's group for coronavirus work in China for the past 5 years through grant, and then they list a number. Understanding the risk of bat coronavirus emergence. Now, Judicial Watch highlighted that document, highlighted that study, and it was our litigation that helped produce this grant application, and I'll talk about in a little bit, that confirms that gain of function was being supported by Fauci's agency, despite his statements to the contrary under oath. There's now been renewed with specific focus on identity cohorts of people highly exposed to bats in China and work out if they're getting sick from COVID. Collaborators include Wuhan Institute of Virology and Ralph Barrick, who is another person who was allegedly involved in gain of function. He was working out of North Carolina. So they reference some of the studies they've been working, but 2 of the references are redacted. So what are they hiding from the American people is what I want to know. What is Fauci hiding about what he was told about what he was funding as coronavirus broke out? Again, this email is from January of last year. So they were all very nervous about it, it's pretty clear. We also received the application and documents about this, including a notice of an award and the actual grant application. So the notice of award says, the specialists also note that award grantees using highly pathogenic agents may warrant a biocontainment safety facility of BSL-3 or higher. Now, supposedly, the Wuhan Institute was 4. Then the application talks about, obviously, the research involving EcoHealth Alliance in New York City, which was the big vehicle for spending all this money in China. You should know it wasn't just the Wuhan Institute that was benefiting from your tax dollars, however objectionable on gain of function and other type of research in that area. It was other places in China. The U.S. government, the taxpayers, you the taxpayer, you were the silent, not so silent partner with China in these biological experiments, which in my view, and many other expert views, frankly had a biological weapons element potentially. And we're funding it. Wuhan Institute of Virology, again, part of the group. There's another here that we're going to look more into, the Institute of Pathogen Biology in Beijing. Among the aims listed, the application, these are the applications. This is what they told the government they were going to be doing and what the government was funding. They will sequence receptor binding domains, spike proteins, to identify viruses with the highest potential for spillover, which we will include in our experimental investigations. In another part of it, they say, we will use S protein sequence data, infectious clone technology. What do you think that means? Infectious clone technology. Huh. Does that sound like gain of function to you? It does to me. In vitro and in vivo infection experiments and analysis of receptor binding to test the hypothesis that percentage divergence thresholds in S protein sequences predict spillover potential. So they're trying to figure out, to be fair to them, look, we want to look at these viruses and see which one of them are dangerous. And it looks like they were going to be playing games with the viruses, replicating them, and managing them in a way to figure out which would be the most dangerous. How much were they getting? The cost for the first year, according to the documents Judicial Watch uncovered here, exclusive, 2019-2020, was $736,996. 2021, $712,000. So, and that number was the same through 2024. Thankfully, Trump shut it down. In July 2020, HHS wrote a letter to EcoHealth Alliance essentially shutting it down. We are concerned that the Wuhan Institute hasn't satisfied safety requirements under the award, and that the EcoHealth Alliance has not satisfied its obligations to monitor the activities of its subrecipient to ensure compliance. Therefore, effective in this letter, July 8th, 2020, NIH is suspending all activities. Why isn't there is there a criminal investigation going on? I mean, when you have a responsibility to make sure that taxpayer money is being spent as you are promising, is that fraud? There should be a criminal investigation of the use of taxpayer money in this improper way, according to the HHS, to fund this research. Specifically, the agency of FAUCI, NIAID, had a total funding of $381,000 designated to be funded, but of course that was cut off. So I think initially only 75 was put out there. This is what the sort of money that they were, this is the sort of activity they were funding. The Wuhan Institute of Virology, for instance, also requested support, this is a quote, for in vitro experiments using pseudoviruses carrying the spike proteins or live viruses in cell lines of different origins, binding affinity assays between the spike proteins and different cellular receptor molecules and humanized mice experiments. Now, we've told you separately how a lot of these humanized mice experiments results from obtaining the organs of babies or unborn human beings killed through abortion. I don't know how they got those organs, created those humanized mice in China, but we know how they do them here in the United States, at least until recently, with your tax dollars. In discussion of their research to date, the grant applicants wrote, in collaboration with Ralph Barrick at University of North Carolina, we used the SARS-CoV reverse genetic system to generate a chimeric virus. I think it's chimeric. It's one of those words you read but rarely hear said. How would you say it? Chimeric. Ah, you see, I never hear that word said. Chimeric. Chimeric. I think chimeric sounds fun, but chimeric, I'll go with chimeric. Thank you, Matt. Generate a chimeric virus with a mouse-adapted SARS-CoV backbone expressing SHC014 S protein with 10% sequence divergence with SARS-CoV. The chimera is replicated in human airway epithelium using the human ACE2 receptor to enter cells. Thus, SARS-CoVs with diverse variants of SL-CoV's S protein without deletions in the RBD can use human ACE2 as a receptor for cell entry. Emphasis in the original, that last sentence. Now, I want you to kind of go back and play what I said again and again and again. And ask yourself, is what Fitton's saying gain of function? Now, these documents are documents similar to these were released. So the Intercept talked about this stuff back in September. We had also gotten the documents. They got them out before we did. So as our lawsuit had produced these documents that the Intercept talked about, and they had experts look at this. And they said, this is gain of function. We will construct, how did you pronounce it? Chimeric SARS-CoVs using the WIV1 backbone. I think that's Wuhan Institute of Virology. And these S genes as done previously. They go on. Construction of chimeric SARS-CoV viruses, infectious clones with the S gene of novel SARS-CoV and the SARS-CoV WIV1 genome backbone using the reverse genetic system developed in our R01. How is that not gain of function? Maybe I'm just being dumb. But we're all become a little bit more expert in this area, haven't we? If at least those of us have been following it. And this indicates to me gain of function. But interestingly, later, in the section entitled P3CO Research, which is Potential Pandemic Pathogen Care and Oversight, SARS-CoV and MERS-CoV are subject to these guidelines, and as such, reverse genetic studies are subject to review. Importantly, we're not proposing to genetically manipulate SARS-CoV over the course of this proposal. However, we are proposing to genetically manipulate the full-length bat SARS-CoV WIV1 strain molecular clone during the course of the proposal, which is not a select agent, has not been shown to cause human infections, and has not been shown to be transmissible between humans. So they're pretending it's not gain of function while actually describing, at least to me, gain of function. So these are pretty extraordinary documents. They deserve worldwide attention. They should be followed up by prosecutors and investigators in Congress and the media and the world. Now, do I know this resulted in COVID-19? I don't. But reading this, it looks like it's in the same ballpark. I mean, heck, that's what they were worried about, a COVID-19, getting out. So we should be getting more documents. I think we have more documents coming in. But this is, again, the most important thing that's happened in world history in however how long, right? The coronavirus. And what has happened in terms of investigating how it came about and who have been maybe messing around with viruses in a way that could have generated in an artificial way this infection? Judicial Watch is doing this investigation. Do you think the Biden administration is seriously investigating Biden's business partners in China? Excuse me, the Biden family's business partners in China, the Chinese government? Of course not. Chinese government, they disappeared people and told everyone they're not cooperating. They're done with it. So frankly, it's going to be up to Judicial Watch to figure out at least what Fauci and his people knew and what the government knew about this. And it looks like they knew a lot. And here we are, nearly a full year after the coronavirus emerged, and only now are they giving us these documents. And they've been sitting on them. It's actually now 2 years, right? Yeah, it's 2 years. How quickly time flies when you're being oppressed. And they're now only giving them to us. This is transparency in the modern age. So when Fauci and the media say, you're attacking me, I represent science. This isn't science he's representing. He's representing a cover-up. He's a government bureaucrat who doesn't want stuff. His agency doesn't want stuff about their misconduct or mistakes. And maybe they were honest mistakes, but I don't think this is honest mistakes. They were told there was trouble, and they pretended there wasn't. And, whether Fauci lied under oath, I think it was an open question. It's even more of an open question given these new documents. So I encourage you to go and read them. I mean, it may sound difficult to follow while I'm reading them, admittedly, but I'm reading them in a way to kind of just highlight that this sounds like they're manipulating viruses that are pretty darn dangerous. And in China, I don't know about you, I don't trust the Chinese communists to think, well, the only reason to manipulate these types of viruses just to make sure we have vaccines ready. So more is coming. Stay tuned.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.